Hey, Mydei here. Brand new Relic sets have dropped yet again for HSR, and so as always, it's time for me to check them out with you guys. This time we have a skill and ult focused set, no, not Scholar, as well as finally a new set made for Debuffer supports. We'll see what they do, how they work specifically in practice using the CE server, and who can use them best. Like and sub for more Relic guides, share to anyone that might want to farm these, and let's begin. Let's start with as Navigator Isee Sees It. The 2-piece is a classic 12% attack buff. The 4-piece is then weird but neat. When the wearer enters combat or uses a skill, their skill and ultimate damage percent will increase by 18%, stacking up to 3 times. So we start with 1, and then every skill onwards gives us another one. At the start of the wearer's turn or after using their ult though, 1 stack will be removed. So the logic explained is combat starts, 1 stack that gives 18% skill and ult damage. On wearer turn start, it removes 1 immediately, resetting you to 0% damage. However, when using a skill, it bumps it back up to 18%, and it is a buff that applies before the skill does damage. So every skill has guaranteed 18%. When using ult, the stack is removed naturally after the ult's damage, so it would get 18% and then drop to 0% afterwards. If you therefore, for example, can only skill once a turn and ult, you have 0% damage into 18% damage into skill hits, into ult with 18% damage into 0% damage. The set is therefore smart and has its buffs up when important. If you skill 3 times in a turn, you'd have 0% damage turn start, into 18% on the first skill, 36% on the second skill, and then 54% on the third skill and beyond. But since it is then pre-stacked, your next turn would drop to 36% damage on turn start, but then immediately jump back up to 54% for the first skill as again it applies before the attack. If you ult, it would be 36% instead on this first skill, then 54%, etc. A final note is that it won't lose stack on extra turns, like Seele during Resurgence or actions in Phainon's ultimate. It has to specifically be on their normal turn. But what this all means is this is a set for specifically skill spammers, as we want to be able to make use of that high 54% damage at 3 stacks. If we have good ult damage, then even better for this set's power. So we'll be looking at units that can use skills more often than the average unit, at least over 1 a turn, so some extra skills off turn like Mydei can work, to consider them for this set. If your unit can only skill once a turn or does not have extra turn hacks, we will disregard this for them. Also, before we start, if you don't know, Isee was a former navigator of the Astro Express, and so this set is likely made for Himiko Nova coming out just a patch later, just like plenty of other relics have been made for future DPS. So in alphabetical order, we first have Anaxa. His first skill will be at 18% damage, his second at 36% guaranteed, and if he gets Siridra's duped skill, it maxes out 2 skills at 54%, whilst also making his next turn start out at 36% even if he ults. His ults should also always be at 54%. So this is better than Scholar guaranteed by quite a decent margin, but Scholar was already weak. Genius can work on him, as in the past, thanks to his weakness in Plant, but that wasn't always that much stronger than Scholar until Def Ignore Verticals. Wave Strider has been his best provided you target him with 2 abilities every ult rotation, and also ult during his turn for maximum uptime, or you hit a 1-turn ult rotation, both which are pretty easy on Anaxa. Navigator is similar in power to Wave Strider at max potential, and so this is a side grade in his optimal rotations and setup, but is an upgrade if you cannot use Wave Strider effectively for whatever niche reason, like you're running an old hyper setup and want to ult off turn. So yeah, not worth farming, but it's another option for new Anaxa players if they exist. Then we have Archer, who can spam 5 skills every turn, guaranteeing 18%, then 36%, then 54% damage for 1 to 3 arrows. After his first turn, you can then guarantee 36%, then 54% for 1 to 4 arrows, as even with an ultimate and a turn start, his first arrow hits 2 stacks. Every ult should also easily hit the 54% damage. Anyway, he currently uses Quantum Set. Now, if you have Damage Percent Orb, Rutilant, and have a 200% damage arrow with his traces, you should be at 281.2% damage, or a 3.812 times multiplier. Applying 0.54 on top gives us 4.352, and dividing this multiplier by the difference gives us a 1.14 times damage amp. And you won't believe it, but 20% Def Ignore is only a 1.12 times damage amp. On top of that, it buffs the ults by even more, as they do not get any high damage percent stacking. It only falls off in follow-up damage, but that's minimal versus skills and ults. If you have a cracked quantum set, don't re-farm, but this is a new best in slot set by 3% in an E0 Sparkle Tribi comp. You'd need high def shred like Welt Rezo or Silverwolf to have Genius winning again. So this set is nice for new Archer players if they pick him up in 4.4 for example, as they don't have to farm that old domain anymore. But it's also great for Archer players that are above 80% def shred pre-Genius's set's 20% def ignore, as that 20% gets weaker and weaker the more def shred it loses towards 100%. And the new set is finally really nice if not versus Quantum Weak for whatever reason, but I feel like you could just use Silverwolf there. Then we have Mortenax Blade who can spam out skills. The two-piece is useless, but the damage percent on the skills and ults is actually quite substantial. Nonetheless, the other new set that came out is stronger for his damage, whilst also boasting damage percent buffs for the whole team. Unlucky. After that, it's all the way to Mydei, who currently uses Scholar. The two-piece again is weak, and if running him in his weak, old-fashioned hypercomp, this set is just a Scholar Sidegrade. However, if using him with his Saridra and or Cyrene setup, he is spamming out skills way more often, all in extra turns or attacks too, keeping a high stack count for this set and making it his new best in slot. 54% damage versus 20%? Next up we have our favorite isolation unit, who has an extra turn gimmick that he can abuse to upkeep the 54% damage from this set. However, he can also do so with the Wave Strider set, which is basically the same in power at max stats. 48% attack versus 54% damage. However, 48% attack is obviously weaker in raw stats than 54% damage, but then the more important point is that Phainon lacks damage percent in most of his teams. Saridra doesn't have any until S1 or E2, Sparkle got hers replaced and she gives attack percent anyway, and RMC has none. If you run a Sunday DHPT comp still, even if it's not optimal, you won't see as much of an impact and in some cases maybe even a drop. But for Cyrene's Saridra runners, you can expect a 3 to 5% damage gain, which is quite a big jump for a Relic set to be honest. If Sunday is also still present, it'll still be an upgrade too. If you have God Mode Relics on Wave Strider, just stick to that, but people on weaker builds, or people just picking him up now, could farm this set instead. Remember finally that this set also needs ramp up and doesn't buff his basics unlike Wave Strider. So I would just take your team, find out how much attack percent versus damage percent you're getting, and make the choice. Finally, Seele has extra skill uses with her new Nova Flare, can use Saridra for even more, and she also has extra turns in Resurgence. She can easily maintain 3 stacks on this set, which like Archer, can let her beat Quantum. But because in her best environments she is self-buffing by like 230% damage, the 54% of this set is hella diluted, not counting any supports on top. Also, it doesn't buff her basics, which actually get used a lot. This is thus a sidegrade or sometimes downgrade and should not be farmed for her. Anyways, I think that is all for this relic set, so on to the next one. Divine Querying Master Smith first offers us a 12% HP buff, our second relic in all of HSR to do so, and it also released for Blade I just like the last one. How cute. Then we get a huge wall of text that basically gives us 28% crit damage versus enemies that are def reduced, and then if you inflict def reduction, all allies get comborant for 2 turns, and that buff increases damage percent by 15%. So 12% HP, 28% crit damage, 15% damage for yourself and the team. Pretty great. It cannot stack though, so this is a 1 per team sort of deal. This set is pretty straightforward. It is technically the highest damage gain you can get for a debuffer support set in a 1-to-1 comparison. So Silverwolf, Pella, Welt, and any debuffer that equips Cypher like Cone or Resolution like Cypher can use it. Naturally, our new Mortenax Blade also use this. Now, 15% damage is nice, but so is taking actions on these debuffer units, and without speed as a 2-piece or the advanced forward on Eagle, it's a whole lot of new speed farming and you still won't beat the actions provided by Eagle. So for a unit that needs to act a ton for delaying and sustainless like Welt, or a unit like Silverwolf spamming ults for Acheron, or a unit like Cypher acting for an extra attack and maybe follow-up for Fei Xiao, this set isn't too crazy. Imagine 1 Acheron ult extra versus 15% damage in a fight. So this is pretty much locked to Blade I right now, and even he can use Eagle for extra actions and thus attacks for Acheron, Ashvel, or Fei Xiao. I do recommend it as a generalist set for him though, as his damage contribution can be quite substantial, and the 12% HP, 28% crit damage, and 15% damage helps a lot with that, on top of it buffing said carries mentioned just before. So yeah, let me know what you think of these new relics and if you're going to farm them. Thank you for watching, thanks to my awesome YouTube members, and have a Guoba day.